So the bluebirds are singing back and forth to each other. It is a brisk 42 or so right now, and we are 1 month back from our average last frost date. And so I did want to talk a little bit about average last frost rates. There are lots of different opinions on that. A lot of people do get confused with the zones. So even though we're a 5B here, that doesn't mean that my average last frost date is the same as yours. And it can be, 5 or 6 weeks different in some cases. So be very careful with understanding what your specific average last frost date is, and watch the weather. And so the biggest thing I'll say is the weather outlook, the 2-week out forecast is so important in planning your garden, especially in these early weeks and on the other end of the season. Ours is May 7th. That's what the Farmer's Almanac says. That's what a lot of the resources say. And so I do go plus or minus a week on either end, or even 2 weeks, depending on what the weather's going to do. So we're going to be watching the weather really carefully. Next week is going to be really warm. Low temperatures in a couple of nights. There's 50s. So that's much different than tonight, for example, is going to be low 20s. So when you're planting stuff out and it says 3 weeks before your average last frost date, take into consideration what type of season you're having this year. It doesn't always match year to year. So, for example, we had snow up until this week. And now we've got all the compost in. Now it's looking like real spring here, but it is possible that we get one more snowstorm. So things that get planted out here or seeded out here now have to be really careful with to make sure that we are planting what is actually going to be able to withstand potential hard frost. We shouldn't have any more hard frosts really, besides tonight, and then it should be 30s probably low going forward, it appears, and that's one of the advantages of having the hoop house. We do have a little electric heater in there. You can see I did take the sides off, so in the previous video I would have gone over all of that and opening up the hoop house for the first time, which seems crazy, but the sun is so intense right now. Our solar on top of our garage is going like crazy. We're really banking in the kilowatt hours, which is great. But that also means that the hoop house with the 6 mil greenhouse plastic, it's got the UV coating and everything, that is going to be really hot during the day, even when it's cooler outdoor temperature. When it's cloudy though, you have to watch that and make sure that the cloudy days you don't open it up as much, because it doesn't have that solar heat. So I've been working on the plan for all of these wonderful raised beds, and I've been working on the plan for the new flower bed and the 2 previous flower beds. And if I need a 4th or not, I'm still trying to figure that out. Working on all the different garden plans. Right behind that is where we do our corn. We've got the garlic up over there. So we've got a lot of spaces that I need to plan out. And I'm trying to figure out what the best way to use the space is. I tend to plant closer than most people, and a lot of times when you're looking at the seed packets, it's like saying 9 to 12 inches apart or 6 to 8 inches apart. And if you look at the flower farmers or the vegetable farmers, a lot of them are planting 4 inches apart for some of these things. And part of that is because a lot of the farmers are going to be the ones who are fertilizing more than the home gardener. They're going to be irrigating or out here watering every single day that it needs it, watching the plants, reacting to the plants' needs. So putting them closer, they have less competition in a agricultural setting than, let's say, your average backyard gardener. I tend to be a mix of both, or maybe more on the side of the ag farmer, because that's what I grew up doing. So I worked at an organic vegetable farm and flower farm for years, and when I was really young, I farmed and backyard gardened with my parents and my family as well, growing up from age probably 4 or 5, I think this is my first flower garden that I had. And so there's a lot of history that I've learned, and a lot of this is all about trial and error and failure, and then being able to adjust to that failure and assuming some crop loss. So we are focused on self-sufficiency. We tried to plant enough for me and my husband Jace, and we also plant extra, and we ended up covering my parents' onions for the year this past season, as well as our own, and we sold some too. So there's a lot of different ways to plan what's good for your family. One thing that we focused on, one of the videos we watched about self-sufficiency, was don't try to be self-sufficient in everything. And we totally agreed with that. I think that was self-sufficient me, of course, good old Mark. But one of the things that really stuck with us was, hey, what do we really want to be self-sufficient in? And what can we be self-sufficient in here in North Central Massachusetts? Understanding that our fruit trees are not the same as down in Florida, right? Or that our season is shorter. So what can we actually overwinter in storage? So that's where we really decided to focus on garlic, onions, and peppers and tomatoes. Those are some key crops. If we had to choose just 4 crops, those would be it. Granted, there's all sorts of varieties within those, but that's the basis of our garden and our core values of the garden in here. This year, where I'm advancing our cut flower gardens, and we're going to be hopefully going to the markets, that's going to really change. So that'll be more to come on that. But now I'm like, hey, I had 36 bell peppers in this bed last year, and we harvested something like 70 pounds of bell peppers out of this one Birdies 8-in-1 raised bed, which is just under 4 by 8. I think it's like 3.5 by 7.5-ish or so. But that's quite a lot out of this one bed in a drought season. The year before, I think I was like 65, and that was my first year kind of playing with it in one bed. I think we were actually in that bed maybe 2 years ago. What I'm doing for rotation doesn't matter as much because of how we're handling the soil, and I will share a bunch of the progress and steps that we took for that at the end of this little tips and tricks section, and how we're working. Again, what works for us might not work for you, so make sure all the advice you're asking when you post something on Facebook, that you know that you need to adjust to what you feel is good and what you think your area or your garden or your location is going to be good for. Everything is not fair and equal in garden world, and no season's exactly the same. So we, because this was I should also say, huge Birdies fan here, as you can tell. We absolutely love them. We get them from Epic Gardening. If you're interested in them, we are vaguely affiliated, I think, at this point. I'm pretty sure Kevin said we were anyways, since we did purchase all of these. So we're not getting free product or anything for that. But you can use Flickr 5 on their site to get a discount, and kind of give us a nod if you end up purchasing anything on Epic Gardening for 5% off. But the Birdies beds, the thing about the tall beds that a lot of people haven't been talking about, and I think this is one of the really important things to talk about, is how the soil can really get compact. And so we did hugelkultur, where you do like the lasagna technique, where we've got big old logs in the bottom of here. We've got all sorts of stuff that we were layering, soil and logs, right? And then we left, the top probably 4 rungs is compost. That way we can do carrots. We can do some stuff that have some deep roots, right? So this is our third season with these, I believe. I think we're at season 3. I've been at this property for just under 4 years now. It'll be 4 years in May, I think. So one of the things, though, is that this soil in tall raised beds, especially the short ones, not as much, but something to watch, is when you get out to the garden in the spring and you're feeling that, put a spade shovel in and see how hard it is to get that spade shovel down 8, 9, 10 inches, And if it has any resistance at all, or it's too easy to do, which we did have a couple of the potato beds, that soil's used, or it's too packed up. And a lot of people talk about no-till and no-dig and all that stuff. When you're working in raised beds, it's very, very different, and it's really important to know how to handle the soils and being able to tell the differences in the soils. And so what we did before we added the fresh compost on top, which you can see here, and it looks all nice and pretty and dark and rich, right? And we got this from Smith Country Cheese out in Winchendon, Mass. And it's wonderfully rich from a dairy farm, right? But before we did that, actually my dad was visiting for this week to do farm projects, and he helped turn every one of these tall beds. And that was important, to turn that bottom soil that had compacted, because all we've been doing for the last couple of years is just add soil and add soil and add soil, right? And so we weren't tilling. But this year he just took a spade shovel and turned it over, and I'll put some video of that. I think I have some. And it was so important to do before we added the compost. The other thing I did was some of the beds that were really, really sandy, I'm going to be adding some more warm compost to those specific beds, and that's especially the beds that had sweet potatoes. So please be aware of that. They ended up being almost sandy, that the potatoes had pulled so much nutrients out of there. And we also added down to earth all-purpose fertilizer, something else we get locally at Emerald City and Westminster, Mass. So wherever we are working on it, it's an OMRI rated. We are not an organic farm by any means. That is a big certification process, but we both really do feel strongly of not putting pesticides out here and spraying things that are bad for us to eat or bad for the environment, or potentially harmful to the wildlife. So we do have a few things that we will use out here when we need it, but the all-purpose fertilizer is a granular, slow release, and we mixed it in on the bottom, and then I'll put it in again on the top, and we'll water it in. And again, these beds are most of them won't get planted out for about a month. We're about 4 weeks out from the average last frost. But these will be ready to go for us, very rich. And you'll see they're going to settle a little bit here. We'll probably top these off one more time before we actually go to plant. Some of these beds will get turned over mid-season, and that's something that is also something to consider. One of the beds that's going to have sweet potatoes, I think, is going to be this guy this year. We're only going to do one bed for sweet potatoes. So I'm going to actually plant a bunch of lettuce and carrots, and as soon as those sweet potatoes come, I will pull those. So we'll get a bunch of baby carrots out of here. We'll get some lettuce, some spinach, some kale, and take advantage of the fact that I'm probably about 45 days out from planting sweet potatoes. So might as well take some baby lettuce and have another grow space for that. So it's all about trying to plan and figure out what's best for us. But I did want to make the comment about making sure you're loosening up your soil so you don't have one big solid block at the bottom and you're only adding 3 inches of root space for your new plants. Irrigation is something else we got asked a lot about, and for the Birdies beds, we did do this irrigation last year, and it's not actually fully hooked up. We don't have the hose officially hooked up. We undo it every night, but we have a little T here. This one would go to the hose link, which sits here. This one comes in, and then we have a short little guy going into our 4 8-in-1 low Birdies beds that we've got put together. This fits 50 tomatoes on the trellis here. We are going to work on the trellis because Jason's talking about switching the cable because it got a little loose, and so some of the tomato plants, when they get to the middle area, would only be able to be like 3 feet tall or so before we'd have to move them. This is a lower and lean technique. It's typically used in greenhouses, but again, style of growing that I'm doing is not always right for everybody, but I much prefer this pruned, less diseases, and I get larger nicer tomatoes than a lot of small tomatoes, which makes it easier for me to harvest and make sauces. So that's again, personal choice. This drip line worked pretty good until we had some rodents jump in the bed and chew on it. So we have to check for leaks this year. I'm not sure how we're going to repair, if we're just going to replace. So we set it back out just to have it there, so it's an easy spot to test. The goal will be to run some type of water line eventually underneath the bulk mulch and come back up in the beds. All of these beds are bottomless, so we'll be able to come up in the corner and have a little spigot in each bed. That's not a small project. I'm not sure it will happen this year. It would be amazing if it did, but I'd much prefer that versus overhead watering. I think that's probably most of the stuff I should say. Oh, the other thing I will say is on the all-purpose fertilizer from Down to Earth, we buy it in 25 or 50 pound bags. And we, for the most part, on the vegetable side of the garden world, we are top dressing that and watering it in every 2 weeks in these beds. So on top of the fact that we got these amazing pile of compost here and we're adding really good compost in the beginning of the season, we want to keep feeding those plants. And so because they're in a contained space with a contained number of amounts of things from the soil, we try to have healthy soil, right? We've got all that good rotten wood in there that's breaking down and adding things. That's really important to us as well. So it's a choice. It's not, again, not for everybody, but that has worked really well for us to consistently have healthy plants. While I'm over here, I'll show you guys quickly the hoop house. I'll put some project stuff up on a later video as well, but we did take out the table here, and I've got a bunch of seedlings out here in the walkway. I've got spinach growing, beets coming up, radishes coming up, bunching onions, peas, onions and garlic, ranunculus, feverfew, poppies, snapdragon, stock, sweet peas for flowers, lupin. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things, but just to give you an idea of what we have going on here, these are the overwintered onions. So we're eating those like on our burgers and stuff right now, and our salads. It's fantastic. And we'll continue to leverage this space as much as we can on top of the basement grow room that we have set up right now for all the seedlings. And like I said, the garlic's doing really well. I just went through and fixed up some of the straw on that. Sometimes over the winter with all this ice and snow, and we had 3 feet of snow just a month ago, or not even. That gets packed down really bad. So going through and checking where there's missing ones is a good idea, because a lot of times they're not really missing. They're just having a hard time breaking through that matted straw. But anyways, I hope this video helps you guys. You learned something new about what I do here to try to make sure that our beds are prepped and ready to go. A month out from average last frost. If I didn't say it, some of the things that I have learned over the years, and then also I really liked the video that it was like a short video that You Can't Eat the Grass put out last week or so. But when the crocuses are flowering, that's when you plant your carrot seeds and your lettuce seeds, and that's when you can put your onions out. There's a whole bunch of things that I think she mentioned there of what she was planting as well. So nod to her for always helping others in the gardens. If you have questions about the Birdies beds, or about what we're growing or how we're growing, or tips or tricks or anything like that, please leave a comment below. I'd be happy to talk about something and help you guys out as much as I can with the knowledge that I've gained. But I still have a lot to learn, and I am not a professional at this. I just do this for fun, right? Just like everybody else. It's a labor of love and a little bit of a de-stressing technique for me from the day job. And it also just tastes better and is healthier. So lots of benefits being outside and hands in the dirt. as well. If you have Birdies beds too, tag me. I want to see them. Post a video, post something on Instagram and tag me. I would love to see how everyone else has these set up. But happy gardening. We got 1 month and we're off to the races.